Hello team, welcome to my session on Coffee with Prab, and today we're going to discuss about new question bank of certified in cybersecurity. These questions prepared by myself by using a several source of documents, which is like a prerequisite of CC exam. Before watching this video, my humble request to check my previous 5 domains videos because that give you good foundation. My name is Prab Nair. For more information, you can check my LinkedIn profile. So without wasting a time, let's start with the first part. Thank you. Okay, so first question, which statement accurately describe, if you read the question carefully, it say accurately describe the proper sequence of ISC2 phases in the data lifecycle phase, okay, or data lifecycle process. I repeat again, which statement accurately describe the proper sequence of ISC2 phases in a data lifecycle process. See, some questions in CC test you the process, it tests your sequence. So in some process you have to remember, and because of that reason I built this question. So first is called store, create, use, share, archive, destroy. The reason for eliminating without creating how you store. Second is a use, store, create. But until unless I don't create, how can it stores? But it's a use, store, create, share, archive, and destroy. Third, it's a destroy, store, use, share, archive, destroy. No. But the fourth step, it's a create, which makes sense. We create a data, then we classify. Okay, once we create a data, we classify. Based on the classification, we decide to store the data, and then we basically use the data. If I want to share with my another authorized party, I will share the data. And once I basically share the data is not in use, we archive as a backup in the altered location, and then we basically destroy when data is not required. So how to remember is C S A D. The best way to remember: create, store, use, share, archive, destroy. That is why the answer is basically D for Delta. Okay, so this is the data lifecycle phase according to the ISC2. Let's move to the next coffee shot. Thank you. Okay, so next question, which of the following is the appropriate risk response? So here the keyword is risk response. When identified risk fall within the organization risk tolerance. See, when we're talking about any risk functions and all that, we have a 3 things. One is basically called as a risk. Let me change the color. So first is basically called as a risk capacity. Okay. Second is basically called as a risk appetite. And third is basically called as a risk tolerance. Always remember, risk tolerance is basically your current state of risk. Let's take example, you're withdrawing every month $10,000 salary. Okay, from that you have decided 5,000 on your learnings, and current training is basically cost 4,500. So according to the current risk, you have taken the call and went for the training because the risk is basically within the appetite. But sometimes what happened, the risk is basically go beyond the appetite. Okay, so like example, there was an exam training which cost you 5,500. So you took some insurance where if you fail, they will pay the entire amount. By taking a $500 insurance, you bring the risk below the appetite, because now you have to pay internally from your pocket maximum 3,000 only. So any risk go beyond the capacity, we avoid, and any risk is basically come below the appetite, we accept. But in this question, what it says, which of the following is the appropriate risk response where the identified risk is fall within the organization risk tolerance, within the risk appetite. So option A, mitigation. Mitigation is a control we implementing to reduce the risk, but the question is not talking about reduce the risk. Second is a risk acceptance. Makes sense, because risk acceptance is basically called when the risk is below the appetite level. And risk transfer is basically all about transferring the risk to the third party. And here when we're talking about transferring the risk, it is like an insurance. It is like an insurance. So we're transferring the financial insurance to third party. Example, we take a medical insurance. Something happened to us. There's a party who will pay on behalf of me. And fourth is called risk avoidance. Boss, I'm going to drop the idea because risk is beyond the capacity. Okay, so right now the risk is below the appetite, which is under the tolerance. That is why the answer I'm going for, which is called as a B for beta. Okay, but yes, if the risk is basically beyond the capacity, then in that case we basically avoid the risk. Okay, so let's move to the next question. Thank you. Okay, so next question is basically, which of the following is the appropriate risk response when identified risk exceed the organization risk tolerance? Okay, so this time what happened, risk is beyond the capacity. Mitigation is to prevent. Acceptance is only possible when risk is below the appetite. Risk transfer, with transferring the financial impact to third party. The only option left is risk avoidance. So that's why we're going with the answer risk avoidance. If you really want to understand again, so let's say example, as I said, the $10,000 is the salary you basically withdraw every month. From that, you decided to keep $3,000. Okay, $3,000 for your, this one, what you called $3,000 you have reserved for the learning. And $2,000 is basically you have kept for your food and expenses. And $1,000 you have decided to keep for your financial investments like mutual funds and all that. So there was one mutual fund which is coming, which costs you $750. So you can take that call because this risk is below the appetite level. Understood? But now there is one mutual fund which is coming around $1,200. So in this case, the risk is basically going beyond the appetite. Okay, now they are saying that do one thing, buying the insurance of $450. If anything happened to the mutual fund, they will pay the entire amount to you. So by investing $450, you have to pay extra only $600. So by this way, your risk is coming below the appetite, and whatever the risk is left after that, you accept. So anything which is, so if the mutual cost you basically $12,000, which is, you know, doesn't give me any opportunity, doesn't give me benefit, and I have to pay from my pocket beyond that. So in that case, I will better drop the idea to buy that insurance, or drop the idea to buy that particular mutual fund. That is the reason we go for the risk avoidance. Is it clear? So let's move to the next question. But summary is that any risk beyond the capacity, we avoid. Any risk below the appetite, we accept. Any risk beyond the appetite, we apply the control by mitigation to reduce the risk below the appetite. And risk which is left after implementing a control, that is basically called as a residual risk. Now let's move to the next question. Thank you. Okay, which of the following is the appropriate risk response that include taking action to prevent or reduce the impact this time? So directly we are going with the answer risk mitigation, because risk mitigation is the call where we basically apply the control to reduce the risk to an acceptable level. That is why the answer is A, because acceptance is basically all about actually once you mitigate the risk which is left, it's called as a residual risk. So default you accept that. Okay, next is basically called which of the following is the appropriate risk response practice of passing the risk to the another party. Here the financial impact we have transferred to third party. Who will accept the financial impact of the harm? Always remember, cyber insurance, financial insurance, when you transfer to third party is called as a risk transfer. Okay, see, now you're moving your skill on a cloud. So it's not a risk transfer, it still is a risk mitigation, because you could not find your existing skill on-prem. So you have used a third party skill to mitigate the risk. But when that vendor is basically agree on giving a financial support, like if something has happened, we're going to pay for that. So let's take example, I want to do a new business in Europe. Okay, I want to do a new business in Europe. Okay, it's a new business. So I have a zero visibility what can be the business prospect in the future. If something has happened, the likelihood of that something is basically low. Okay, like I'm assuming in worst case, so likelihood of any incident will be low. But even one incident happen, the impact is basically very high. So I don't want to take a risk. I repeat again, I want to start a new business in Europe and I don't know the further business opportunity. Even I am doing a business, even one activity happened wrong, there is a strong regulatory penalties are there. And for that, we need to pay 4% of total revenue. Okay. Or something like 20 million euro as a GDPR penalty. So for me, the likelihood is low of the risk in that new business, but if it happened, the impact is high. So in that case, what happened is we took and the cost is 4 million or 4% or 20 million, which is beyond my capacity. So in this case, I took the call that I purchased. So here my risk capacity is suppose 10 million euro. Let's take example 10 million euro. And my risk appetite for the project was 5 million. Now, current risk is basically beyond the 5. Okay, 4% of the revenue. So what I did, I have invested in 1,000 euro insurance. If something happened, they will be the one who will pay the penalty for that. Okay, so annually we have to pay 12,000 euro. Example. Okay, which basically save my 4 million euro. So by this way, I can bring the risk below the appetite. So I transfer the impact to third party. That is why the answer is basically risk transfer. Okay, risk transfer. Hope it is clear to everyone. Okay, so whenever we basically transferring the financial impact to third party, that is basically called as a risk transfer. Now let's move to the next question. Thank you. Okay, it's a very interesting question. What is the primary objective of risk assessment? See, when we say risk assessment, is all about identifying the risk, analyzing the risk, okay, and evaluate the impact. Okay, against the appetite, capacity and all that. So in identification risk, we identify threat, we identify vulnerability, we identify asset. The risk analysis basically where we do the qualitative and quantitative analysis and evaluating a result so that we can able to treat the risk. Risk treatment is basically transfer, avoidance, acceptance and mitigation. Now question say risk assessment. It means we're talking about what is the purpose of these 3 steps. Option A, prioritize by risk level and used to inform risk response decision. Makes sense. Identify threat event that could be produced by those source. Option C, communicate risk assessment result to designated organization stakeholders. And option D is mitigate the risk. So I'm eliminating first mitigate, which is the least answer because risk mitigation is part of a treatment. To identify threat event is a part of a risk identification. So B removed. Now we left with A and C. See, communicate the risk assessment result to the designated organization stakeholder. That is not an outcome. That is part of a evaluation. Okay, once we're done with that, we give. But the question talking primary objective of risk assessment. The primary outcome of risk assessment, the answer is C. Communicate the risk assessment result to designated organization stakeholder. But question talking primary objective of risk assessment. So answer is basically A for alpha, because by the risk assessment, we can able to prioritize the different level of impact. High risk, medium risk, low risk, that visibility we get from the A. Primary outcome of risk assessment toward the senior management, then answer is basically C. That we giving a risk details to the management. But in that also we include the decisions of the treatment. Okay. So here the ultimate goal is to prioritize by the risk level, which is used to inform risk response decision. Actually C is covered in the A because without A, C is not possible. Okay. So let's move to the next question. Thank you. Okay. So which of the following does not represent the type of control? Physical control is a type of control which include my physical hardware device such as badge reader. Okay, architecture feature of building facility that address the process-based security need. Technical control is also a type of control. It's like logical control, like security control that computer system has. Encryption, password controls of the system, technical in nature. Administrative control is also type of control. It is also called as a managerial control, which basically used to modify the behavior of people. Let's take example, tomorrow company sent an email, management sent an email to everyone. We are resuming work from office. So it's a mail sent to everyone to change the behavior. That's administrative. Okay. And then they inform the security guard in the main gate, please make sure every employee bring vaccination wearing ID card. That's a physical control because security guard was a physical control which monitoring physically. Now they will punch the card and through that only access the gate. So punching a card, technical function is there which validate the access. That's a technical control. Preventative is a category, it's not a type. That's why the answer is basically preventative control. Okay. Now next question. Which of the following is not one of the canon? Canon is very, very important for ISC2 exams. You must be familiar with the canons. So option A, protect society, the common good, the necessary public trust and confidence in infrastructure, which is true. See, canon is the law of ISC2. Tomorrow, once you clear the CC exam, you automatically become a member of ISC2. So if you're involved in any bad activity and all that, people will say how the ISC2 has issued the certificate to them. So it basically questions the reputation of ISC2. That is why before you write proactively, you should know about the canons. And that is why the canons is very important for the exam. So you should know their rules. So protect society is definitely a canon. Act honorably, honestly, justly, responsibly, legally, it's also a canon. Provide diligent, competent service to the principal is also a canon. Require that we adhere and being seen to adhere to the highest ethical standard, that is not a canon, that's a preamble. So fourth is basically called as a advance and protect the profession. So how to remember? PAPA. P A P A, PAPA. Okay, P A P A, PAPA. Okay, PAPA. Why? So protect society, P. A, act honorably. Then P again, provide diligent. And last is called as advance and protect the profession. Distributing the question paper, revealing the question dumps after clearing the exam, it's a breach of the fourth canon, advance and protect the profession. Not attending the webinars, not attending a seminars, it's basically the breach of advance and protect the profession. Not installing the right adequate physical security control to protect the physical safety and all that, that is a breach of the first canon. You must be honorable, honest, you should not hide anything, you should not lie, that is basically a breach of, it's basically about following the second canon, act honorably. For which you have been appointed, you're doing your duty correctly, you're not misusing your power, that is called provide diligent and competent service to the principal. And last is advance and protect the profession, where you basically diligently protecting the profession of IC2, not distributing the question paper, not giving anything, not telling about what came in the exam and all that. Okay, and upgrading your knowledge. That's why they have a CP points. Okay, so let's move to the next question. Thank you. Now question is, what factor need to be considered? What factor need to be considered most when deciding to implement a control? Very good question. Question has a word called most. Now how to identify most or best? The best way to identify most, example, most people in December go to Goa. So it's like a populated answer. But I best to prefer go to Kerala. So it is my subjective opinion. Okay. So question say what factor need to be considered most. Most mean 90%. Maximum people. Okay. When deciding the implement. Control cost versus impact makes sense because we have to see the cost of the control and we also see what is the level of impact they reduce. We don't limit it to only confidentiality and integrity because we have availability. Risk cannot be eliminated. Only based on a cost benefit analysis, we cannot take a call. Example, there is a firewall, which is a cost effective. But there's no point that it does not reduce the impact. So control was introduced to reduce the impact, but also we need to see the balance of control cost. Okay, that is why I will go with the answer called A for alpha. Okay, let's move to the next question. Thank you. Which type of control introduced in an organization to direct an employee behavior? Keyword is here, employee behavior. Administrative control is basically like a administrative decisions and all that. Company introduces policies to modify the behavior of the people. Makes sense. Technical control apply on the technical function. Example, firewall, which monitor the packets. Password system, which is protect the desktop. Physical control, something you implement physical in nature. And preventative, there is no. So only option left here is administrative control. When company introduces policies, administrative guidelines, which modify the behavior of the people. That's why the answer is A for alpha. Okay. Okay, so we have a next question. What is the primary purpose of business continuity plan in the enterprise? Option A, provide procedure for sustaining mission business while recovering from significant disruption, which makes sense because BCP ultimate goal is to provide the support in such a way that we can able to sustain the business in the case of disaster. Option B, provide procedure for disseminating internal and external communication. See, this is, if you read the keyword procedures, okay, for disseminating internal external communication. This is not a BCP plan. This is the crisis communication plan, which is part of a BCP. Okay. Third is provide the procedure for mitigating and correcting a cyber attack. The keyword is cyber. So BCP is not limited to only cyber. BCP talk about both information, non-information both. So it is a cyber incident response plan. And option D is provide the procedure for relocating information system operation to an alternate location. So it is a disaster recovery plan. So if you take an example, right now I'm taking this training. So I have a BCP plan in the case of disaster. In the case of power failure, I have a UPS. With that, I can continue my recording. Okay, but UPS will start in the case of power failure. That's part of my DR. So DR, continuity plan, all are basically work together to make sure I should continue my recording in the case of power failure. So DR plan, incident response plan, all these plans are work together to sustain the business in the case of disaster. That is why the ultimate goal or primary purpose of BCP is to provide A, because ultimate goal of the BCP is to sustain the business in the case of disaster. That is why the answer is A for alpha. Let's move to the next question. In a scenario where multiple documents are being reviewed, which one of them are not mandatory for inclusions? Okay. Option A, policy. See, whenever we're doing an audit, policy is very important to review. Policy is a statement which is basically approved by the management. It is the intent of the management. Okay, so first we always create a policy. Hey, every system must be protect with the password. Okay, but how? Policy talk about we need this, but how? We need to have a 8-character password. That is a standard. Okay, fine. How to create 8-character password? We need a procedure. So when we creating a policy manual, standard and procedure is mandatory. But what is not mandatory is guideline. It is good to have. That is why the answer is basically D. So when we're doing an audit, good to review policy, procedure, standard, because guideline is basically optional in nature. Okay, that is why the guideline is always optional in nature. Let's move to the next question. That's one more important thing we have in this, which is called baseline. It is basically introduced for the configuration standard. Let's take example. Every system must be protected with a password. Password must be a good password character or 8-character. Minimum alphanumeric special is required. We cannot go below that according to Windows security baseline. And then we basically create we create a procedures. Same example is every data must be protected with a strong encryption. So standard is basically AES. Minimum key length according to the baseline is 128. And how to create is a procedure. But guideline is the only thing which is optional in nature. Okay, so let's move to the next question. Thank you. So we back with a new coffee shot. Proper documentation of evidence is important to support any future investigation or legal proceeding. In which stage of the incident management process we must acquire, preserve, secure, and document evidence? So in this particular section, we're talking about the phase of incident management. Okay. From the CC exam perspective, it is very important for you to know in each and every phase of incident management process, according to NIST, what is the activity happen. So question talking about proper documentation evidence is important. Now question is in which stage this is in which stage we acquire the evidence, we preserve the evidence, we secure the evidence, we document the evidence. So option A, detection, option B, preparation, option C, containment, eradication, recovery, and option D is basically post-incident activity. See, if you go by the NIST incident management process, the first step is basically called as a preparation, if you go by the logic. Second step is basically called as a detection and analysis. Third step is called as a containment. And fourth step is basically called as a post-incident review. Now, but here, question document in which stage we acquire, preserve, secure, and document the evidence. Okay. So sometimes the question talking about the sequence. Okay. So according to sequence, we need to answer. So option A, detection analysis. See, in this particular stage, we determine whether incident has occurred, and we also prioritize handling the incident based on a relevant factor like functional impact, information impact, recoverability effort, and all that. So that is basically happen once we, confirm the incident. Preparation is basically stage where we set up the policies and everything of the incident management and all that. Containment, eradication, recovery, it's basically a stage where we preserve, we secure, we document the evidence, definitely, because in detection analysis we have confirmed it's an incident. Okay, so example, like we have a system A and there is a user who basically working on that activity. He discovered some suspicious activity, he raised the ticket to the incident management team. Let me change the color. So now what happened is, once he found something suspicious and all that, he basically, asked some questions and confirm it's a true incident. So all this activity happened in the detection and analysis. Now in containment itself, it's called as isolation. So in this particular stage, we basically isolate a system, but before isolate, we basically dump the memory data, we dump all the critical data, we do the graceful shutdown. And this is basically where we're talking about, acquire, preserve, secure, document evidence. Along with that, we contain the incident. How? We isolating a system immediately from the network to make sure it should not have a further damage. Okay, we eradicate the incident. We identify, mitigate all the vulnerability that were exploited. We remove the malware. We will check if anything inappropriate is there. Okay, and we recover from the incident and return the system back to the production. All those things is basically happen in the C stage. And then fourth step is basically called as a post-incident activity, where we hold a lesson learned meeting to understand what is the lesson we have learned from this incident. And according to that, we try to improve the particular process. So question was talking about most acquire, preserve, secure, and document. That is why the answer is basically C for Charlie, containment, eradication, recovery. Because once the incident is confirmed, the first thing is that we need to preserve the evidence, we need to isolate a system, we need to remove the malware, we need to restore the system back to the production, which is actually happening in the C stage, which is called containment. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. Okay, so let's move to the next question. In which stage of the incident management process we determine whether incident has occurred? Okay, so we already discussed detection and analysis, where we confirm. Preparation is establishment phase. Containment, where we confirm thing, we are going to isolate, we remove the system from the network, we remove the malware from the system, we restore the system back to the production, and we have a lesson learned. So question specifically talking about in which stage of incident management we determine whether incident has occurred, and that is the answer called A for alpha, detection analysis, because this is the stage where we confirm. Okay, this is the stage where we basically confirm is it a true incident or not. Okay, because not necessarily every incident whatever user has reported is a true incident. Okay, so that is why in this particular stage we confirm. Let's move to the next question. Which phase of the incident response process helps to improve the security measure and the incident handling process? Now two keywords are there in this question. One is basically talk about help us. Second keyword is improve security measure, and third word is incident handling process. See, whenever in the exam, whenever we're talking about the process of improving the overall incident response function, improve the reporting and all that, this is mostly done in the post incident activity, because our priority is basically to make the system ready back to the production, because we have a SLAs, we have a contract, and we always have a pressure just to make sure we correct the things and restore the system back to the production. So business should not suffer. Then later on, we sat together and discuss, okay, why this happened, how this happened, make sure this should not be happen again. Okay, in the first stage when user has reported the incident, the team was not available, so we need one person in night shift. So this is how they want to improve the incident management process. That is why the answer is basically D for Delta, post incident activity, because question talking about which phase of the incident response process help us to improve security measure. A, detection analysis, where we confirm. Preparation, where we build the incident management policies. Containment is isolate a system, remove the virus, eradication, restore the system back to the production. So post incident is the only phase where we have a lesson learned and we try to see how to improve the process. That's what the answer is, D for Delta. Now let's move to the next question. Thank you. Which type of access control leaves a certain amount of access control to the discretion of the object owner or anyone else authorized to control the object access? The keyword here is object owner. Object owner can be, suppose I am the user of the system. I've created a folder. So I am the owner of the folder. I can decide, so right click on the my computer. So right click on the my folder, properties. I add my brother username and I deny him to access my folder. So it is my discretion. It was my decision to decide who can access, who cannot, because overall access control is two type only. We have a DAC and we have an NDAC. DAC is basically which is controlled by the user. That's why it's called distributed discretion access control. Lack of governance, more flexibility, because power is given to the user and data owner decide who has access to the resource. Simple, na? You create a folder, right click on the folder, even you can deny administrator also. So you have a more power in the case of DAC, because in the NDAC, it is the administrator who decide who can access or who cannot. So option A, talking about DAC, makes sense. NDAC is basically where administrator decide who can do what in the system. The controls are defined by the administrator, like example, domain. Third is basically called as a MAC. In a high military secure systems where you need to build your own custom database and all that, there you want some kind of a restricted rules. There we basically apply MAC, mandatory access control. It is a default control we have in the operating system. So in the MAC, what happened is, suppose, let me explain you the process. So here we have a top secret, and confidential. Okay. And here we have only three classification: senior management, management, and practitioner. So now what happened is, we have a data. Let's take a hypothetical scenario. This is the data we have. This data has been labeled as a top secret. Okay, I'm using a word here is label. Okay, so whenever in the exam talking about label, clearance. Okay, if these keywords are there, remember answer is MAC, because in the MAC we talk about the label clearance top function. So top secret has been labeled. So according to that, anything which is labeled as a top secret, it is available to the senior management, because when we're building a database, when we're building a OS, we added this logic into that system. It's a default rule. Same like, in Windows, in Linux, we have a function run as a sudo command. It's a default logic, run as a sudo command as a default logic. Same like here, we have built a database in that we add this rule as a default rule. Now, if this data has been secret, it is only available to management. If data is basically confidential, it is only available to practitioner. So it is very restricted. We have only three options: either user add to the senior management, user add to management, user add to practitioner, or we label the data as a top secret, secret, confidential. So it is very restricted in nature, very rigid in nature, and it is a default rule. So it is not a scalable. If the company increase the user to 1,000 users, we only have three options. So where the security clearance labels is basically involved, through which we're giving access, that is basically called as a MAC, mandatory access control. We cannot go beyond that. And last is called as a RBAC. RBAC stands for role-based access control. So instead of adding each and every user in a particular folder, we create a group. Suppose we have a backup operator group, we have a system operator group, we have a network operator group. So user is basically add to the backup operator, so he get all the backup permission. User is add to the system operator, he get all the system operator permission. User is basically add to the network operator, he get all the network operator permission. So instead of adding each and every user in a particular file and folder, we add a group itself. And that is basically called as a role-based access control. So in this case, the question talking about here is, the question is basically talking about which type of access control leaves a certain amount of access control to the discretion of the object owner. Okay, so we're giving more power to the object owner. Is it clear? So that is where the answer is DAC, because in DAC, it is a data owner decide who has access to the resource. In the NDAC, administrator decide. MAC, we have a default logics, and RBAC is based on a role-based access control. Let's move to the next question. Now in this question, it says which type of access control system enforce system security policy through the use of a security label. So three keywords are there: system security, it means default policy, and label. So answer is basically automatically MAC, mandatory access control. Is it clear? because we have 4 options. DAC is for the user, NDAC is for administrator, MAC is basically mandatory access control, which is a default logic within the system, and RBAC is basically group based access control. Okay, now let's move to the next question. It's interesting question. Which principle address information security strategy? Principle, okay. Principle address. So first keyword is basically principle. Address information security strategy, integrating people, technology, operation, which can be process, capability to establish variable barriers across multiple layer and mission of the organization. Multiple layer mean layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. Layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. Okay. So first option is separation duty. See, separation duty basically mean we divide the duty into 3 parties. So example, we have a person 1, we have a person 2, and we have a person 3. Okay, so we divide one process into 3 parties. Person 1 create a bill, person 2 sign the bill, person 3 approve the bill. Then only they complete one transaction. That is called separation duty. We will not let one person to complete all the transaction. Otherwise, it can lead to the fraud. Second is principle of least privilege. Unnecessary right has been assigned to the user to perform the duty, not less, not more. So that is called principle of least privilege. Example, I join as a system administrator. I will do system administration activity only. They will not give me more privilege than that. They will not give me more privilege than that. Third is called defense in depth. Defense in depth is called as a layer of control. Layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. And then we have a system. So if someone try to hack, he has to break the multiple layer. If one layer is down, we have another layer to support. If that layer is down, we have another layer to support. So that is the defense in depth. And fourth is called as a privilege function, which is basically used to manage a privilege. So according to the question, the close answer is basically defense in depth, because defense in depth is basically used to protect the weakest link in the organization, which is the people. So we don't trust their inputs. That is why in their laptop, you can see the DLP, you can see antivirus, their systems are running with the principle of least privilege. Okay. So if one layer is break, we have another layer to block. If that layer is break, we have another layer to block. That is the reason. That's why it's called as a defense in depth. Let's move to the next question. Which of the following principle dictate each task, process, or user is granted to minimum right required to perform the job? See, separation duty basically means each task, one task divided into 2 parties, so 3 parties to complete the transaction. But the question is not talking about here the series of tasks. They say each task process is granted the minimum right. Okay. So separation duty talk about one task divided into multiple party. So they have to work together to complete the transaction. But from the definition, it doesn't look like that. Second is principle of least privilege, where the necessary right has been performed, given to the user. Minimum right given to the user to perform the duty makes sense. Defense in depth is a layer of control. Privilege function is basically more from privilege activity. So here the answer is basically principle of least privilege. Okay, that's what the answer is, B for beta. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. Okay, so we are in the next topic. What protocol must be utilized for remotely managing a firewall? Okay, so firewall is basically a solution which is used to protect the organization from external attack. And if someone able to manipulate the firewall, then it is gone. So remotely, sometime administrator use utilities to manage the firewall. So they're talking about which protocol you can use to utilize to managing a firewall. So telnet, but telnet send the data in a plain text. FTP send the data in a plain text, but FTP is basically more about accessing a file servers and all that. SSH makes sense because it is a solution which is used for connecting a servers over the secure channel. Whatever the data we send through the channel, it is secure. HTTP send the data in a plain text. So the only option basically left is SSH. SSH is actually an alternative of Telnet for the remote management. Nowadays, what happened for the graphical, we use AnyDesk and all that, right? So for the command interpreter access remotely, we supposed to use Telnet. Like we go to CMD prompt, we enter Telnet space IP and we get the command prompt of the remote system. But problem is that in the Telnet, the information which is exchanged within 2 systems, it's sent in the plain text. So I cannot imagine I'm managing my firewall remotely on the Telnet. Anyone can able to intercept my data. So I have a small snacks here. Here you can see, if you see the unsecure protocol is FTP. Okay, the alternative of FTP is the secure alternative, which is called SFTP. Okay, And unsecure port number is called as a 21, which is basically the port of FTP, which send the data in plain text. So alternate of FTP, we can use SFTP, which called SSH over FTP. For that, we basically have a port number is called 22 or 990. Now telnet is there. Okay, it's port number 23. Okay, and secure port of alternate of telnet, we are using SSH, which port number 22. Then HTTP is basically which is basically use port number 18. The alternate of HTTP is called HTTPS. So remember, from CC exam perspective, alternate of HTTP is HTTPS, which basically send the data in a secure manner. Alternate of remote management of telnet, we have SSH, the port number 22. Alternate of FTP is SFTP, which work on the 22 or SFTP, which is called as FTPS 990. So these are the protocols we have, which we basically use for the function. Let's move to the next question. Which solution monitor the characteristics of a single host? Okay, remember, single host, and the event occurring within that host for a suspicious activity. So two keywords are there: monitor, characteristics, single host, event occurring within that host. So normally what happens, we use antivirus, but antivirus is more about detecting it is used for detecting a virus. But what about other things? If someone tried to tamper the system, so for that, normally what happens, we use some enterprise solutions, and that is basically called as a IDS, intrusion detection system. There's a dedicated video I made on that. So IDS is basically a solution which monitoring the system integrity, network integrity. So if you see the logic, let me change the color. Okay, so IDS is basically a solution which is used to detect the intrusion. Now we have a two type of IDS. One is called as a NIDS, and one is basically called as a HIDS. Okay, so NIDS we basically install on the border of the network, strategic positions, which is called border of the network. So here we have a NIDS, and here we basically connect the switch. We have a system A, we have a system B, and here we have a system C. Okay, so now what happened is, so we have a traffic which is coming from outside. The IP was 2.1.1.1. So this IP is origin the traffic which is coming from outside to NIDS. So NIDS can only help you to detect from where the traffic is coming. But what kind of a change it introduced in a system A, what kind of a tamper it introduced in a system A, that will not be detected by the NIDS, because traffic already left the NIDS. So changes which is happening in the system A, we need a HIDS. So HIDS basically monitor the integrity of a system state. Any kind of a modification attempt happen on the in the system, it will be detected by the HIDS. Okay, so question talking about characteristics of a single host and event occurring within that host. So HIDS is basically used within the host, NIDS on the border network, SIM is also used for network monitoring on the enterprise level, antivirus used to detect the virus. That is the only role. So in this case, the close answer is basically called as a HIDS, host-based intrusion detection system. So here you can see I have a coffee shop with snacks. Don't worry, it should not be dry coffee. So here you can see HIDS detect and monitor suspicious activity or policy violation on a specific device or host. Where it works on the individual host like a server, workstation, or device. NIDS monitor, analyze the network traffic to detect alert on potential threat, deployed at the strategic point within the network to monitor traffic. SIEM, so what is SIEM here? So what happened is, we have a firewall here, example. It is basically connect with the switch. Okay, here we have a system A, here we have a system B, here we have a system C. Okay, so we have a system A, we have a system B, and here we have one solution which is called as a SIEM. So any IP attack happens, for example, there's an IP attack happen, 1.1.1.1, it was able to bypass the firewall. That activity record in the SIM. This activity record in the SIM, this activity record in the SIM, this activity record in the SIM, because that IP attacks system A, B, C. So in SIEM, the first thing is that it collects the logs from all the system. I don't need to go to each and every system. Second is basically it normalize. Normalize basically mean convert into common format. Then they basically aggregate. And then they try to correlate how this IP is with the help of timestamp able to bypass the firewall. Then it went to which system. So they can able to create one event. And then you confirm from the event, it is an incident and all that. So fastest way to respond to any attack, we can do with the help of SIEM. SIEM is more like a detective solution on the enterprise level. So that is why we have Eliminate. So SIEM is basically providing real-time analysis security alert, which is generated by the application, network, hardware, and all that. So work across the entire IT infrastructure, integrating with the multiple systems. On the other side, antivirus is there. We detect the prevent, remove the malware, including a virus worms, and install on the individual computer to protect against only malware. So in this case, only for detecting activities and all that, we use the HIDS. Now next is basically which monitor network traffic for a particular network segment of device, analyze the network application protocol activity to identify suspicious activity. Option A, HIDS, but HID is limited to the host. NIDS monitor the network level. SIEM is more from an enterprise monitoring, collect and correlate. Antivirus only used for detecting a virus. So only option left is, yes, NIDS, network intrusion detection system. Let's move to the next question. Which of the following solution is not used to identify threats? Okay, identify, not preventing, identify. IDS used to detect the threats. SIEM with the aggregated monitoring detect the threats. NIDS monitor the network level. The thing which doesn't detect but prevent is basically NIPS, Network Intrusion Prevention System. That is why NIPS is the answer. Okay. Next question. Which cryptography algorithm use the same secret key? Use the same secret key for its operation and if applicable for reversing the effect of the operation. They use the same key to encrypt and decrypt the data. Option A, symmetric, makes sense because symmetric key is used same key to encrypt and decrypt the data. They're using a same key to encrypt the data, and they basically use the same key to decrypt the data. Asymmetric use two different keys. One key is called public key and one is basically called as a private key. So public key used to encrypt, alternate key, private key used to decrypt. Hash is basically used for integrity. Digital signature is basically offer the authenticity and non-repudiation. So only option left is A for alpha, symmetric. Primary advantage. So if I want to share some pointer here. So when you document symmetric, so we have a system A and we have a system B. So this is basically the data we have, suppose. So data is basically encrypted with the key 1 and it produces the ciphertext and it's sent to the B. Now if B want to decrypt this ciphertext, like ye to ho raha hai, now I have spoken Hindi a little bit. So some people will not be able to understand this Hindi. So for them it's an encrypted text. So if B same, it's a ciphertext. So he need a key. So A will send the same key. He apply the same key and decrypt the data. So we are use same key. But in the asymmetric, A basically have a two key. One is called public key A and private key A. B also have a two key, public key B and private key B. Is it clear? Public key and private. So A will basically use, if he use his public key to encrypt the data, he need to share his private key, and if he uses private key to encrypt the data, he need to share his public key. So in this case, if A want to send data, he will request his public key and B will basically provide his public key by which he encrypt the data and send it to the B. B will use his private key to decrypt the data. So by this way, the data is only available to B. Okay. So primary advantage symmetric, it is fast. Primary advantage symmetric, it is fast because it use same key to encrypt and decrypt the data. And primary disadvantage of asymmetric, it is slow because it use one portion of a key to encrypt and one portion of a key to decrypt. Okay. Now, next thing is basically called as a which process establishing and maintaining a framework and supporting management structure and process to provide assurance that information security strategy are aligned with the support align with and support business objective and are consistent with the applicable law and regulation through adherence to the policy and internal control and provide assignment of responsibility in all the effort to manage the risk. Very big question. you will get. So which process? Out of following, which process? Establish and maintain framework, okay. Supporting management structure, okay. Provide assurance that information security strategy align with the business objective, okay. So I'm looking for something which align with the business objective, which is consistent with the applicable law regulation, okay. And also maintain a thorough internal control and provide assignment of responsibility. See, risk management is only help you to identify, analyze, and evaluate and mitigate. So one part of the question they're talking about that, but this entire description is not a risk management. Second, we have a compliance management. Compliance management is all about act of compliance. Okay. Third is called security governance. Security governance makes sense because it is a set of operation by which we implement this entire practice. And risk assessment is a part of a risk management. Risk management is a part of a security governance. Compliance management is a part of a security governance. Is it clear? That's why the answer is C for Charlie. So this is all from my side, team. Do let me know how do you find this coffee shot, the new coffee shot of CC, and shall I make the part 2, okay, of another 25 questions which give you visibility about the CC exam, okay. If you pass this exam by this video, do share your comments, do share your suggestion in the comment box. How do you find this video from the passing perspective? And if you pass, just give credits. That is the only thing I required, because people doing party on 31st, I'm making this video for you. People making a party on 31st who believe in present, I'm making these videos for the future aspirants. So do respect the hard work and do subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to make sure you should not miss my future videos on a similar topic. But make sure you should watch the rest of all the 5 domain videos which I made on CC. Good day. Bye.